Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Insurance Town. I'm the mayor, Heath Sheeran, and the host of this podcast, and I am pumped you're here hanging out with us today because I got my friend Ema Roloff hanging out with me, and I couldn't do this without my partners and my friends over at Canopy Connect. They are the one-click solution to getting deck pages you need to quote your prospects. They also have intake platform. They're also able to get you anything and everything you need to quote prospects, from loss runs, from driver list, you name it. They're going to be able to get that for you. Go to usecanopy.com/Heath and get your discount, get a demo, all the things, and tell them the mayor sent you. I love working with them. If you're not using Canopy Connect, I don't know what you're doing in your agency. They are a game changer. Go check them out. Also, my good friends over at OneFort AI. OneFort is a game changer as well for your agency. They're going to help you to be able to quote better. They're going to help you to be able to communicate faster. They're going to help you to be able to do all the things you need to do inside your agency. Guys, go to onefort.ai and check it out. Tell them the mayor sent you as well. And Toby and his team over there will take good care of you. Ladies and gentlemen, also ditch the call center. Get rid of using a call center and use texting. Use Mav. Go to hiremav.com and check it out and get higher close ratios, get better communication. They can help you to qualify leads. They can help you to get better leads in front of your agents. Use Mav. Go to hiremav.com and check it out. All right. Now, Ema Roloff. Jump in here and let's have a conversation, my friend.
Here I am.
What's going on, Ema? How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I am so good. I'm glad that we're having this conversation. As we've talked before, now I get to have you on a podcast with me. And as we talked before, like, we've been connected for a long time in the interwebs and on LinkedIn and whatnot. And you've really started showing up a lot more in my feed. And I don't know what the deal is. I guess LinkedIn wanted us to be closer friends, but I love it. And I love seeing what you're doing. And I've loved following your career and your journey, even going back to several years back. So it's very cool. And now you're all in with the Roloff Consulting, working with your husband. What's that been like? How is it working with your husband?
We make a really good team. I know that there are some people that hear that and are like, oof, I could never. But I think the things that make us a good team in life make us a good team in business. And I always joke with people that, like, we met very early in life working in a restaurant when we were in high school and college. Yeah. So when we started dating, we were working together. And I feel like the stress of running a restaurant together, with a bunch of like teenage employees, is probably more stressful than what we're doing today. And so we learned the ropes early on in our relationship.
Oh, I hear you. You know, I work not literally with my wife, but we work together in a lot of different areas. And again, that partnership in our friendship, in our relationship as a married couple has helped us so much in our business relationship as well. But, you know, as I've told you before in our conversations in the past, it's like, the hard part for me is turning off the work brain and turning on the husband brain. And sometimes that overlaps sometimes. And my wife would be like, dude, let's shut off business for a minute and let's just be friends for a minute. And let's just talk. And so sometimes it's hard for me to do that.
Sometimes we both have to do that to each other. And that is like a hard, that off button is hard. But from our perspective, like, our kids come home, they get off the bus, they have maybe 1 hour where they'll tolerate it. And then after that, they make it very clear it's time to change gears.
And you have 2 girls, right?
Yep. Yeah. A 7-year-old and a 10-year-old.
I was about to say, I know you have a 10-year-old. We talked about that. I couldn't remember 7. That's awesome. That's good ages, man. Mine are all teenagers. I kind of wish they were in that 10 and 7 before they learned to talk back to me. But anyhow.
Oh, wait, yours waited?
I hear you. So real quick, before they just hear us just eavesdrop on our conversation for a little bit, let's take a walk down memory lane and tell me a little bit about Ema and what brought you to where you are today, kind of your background a little bit. I'd love to hear it. I know the audience would too.
Yeah. So I have a little bit of a windy road to get to where I am right now, which I don't think is uncommon, but I started with the intention of being a middle school or high school social studies teacher. So I have a secondary education degree, and while I was in college, I had the opportunity to do a training internship with the restaurant chain that I had worked at all through high school and college. And so I took that training position at the Culver's, for any Midwestern folks, at the Culver's
The
headquarters.
butter burger.
Butterburgers and custard. I took that corporate training position my last 2 years of college, and I got this really unique experience where I got to be student teaching, living what it was going to be like in the classroom at the same time of having this hands-on experience in the business world. And I kind of realized through that, like, there's something to business that I'm interested in that I probably never would have realized without that internship. By the time that graduation came around, there was a full-time position available for me in the department that I had done my 2 summers of interning in. And so I decided, you know what, let's give business a try. I will always have my teaching degree. I can go back to teaching if that feels like the right fit. And I was still teaching. I was teaching big people instead of little people. And so it was like this very nice transition for me to see, like, what does business look like? After a couple of years in that, I decided I wanted to make a move towards technology, and initially was looking at tech training positions. And my husband and a couple of other family members, I joke, always did a intervention with me over Thanksgiving, where they sat me down and they were like, "You need to go into sales." And I was like, "That sounds icky, and I don't like the idea of selling stuff." And they were like, "You know what? Give it a try." And my husband, I think, like, now looking back over 10 years later, this was the cusp of what our business is now. He said to me, "The best salespeople are teachers. If you find a product you care about, a company you believe in, all you have to do is teach people about how you're going to solve their problems. You don't have to sell anything." And so I applied to one sales job, I think, to shut him up more than anything, to show him that no one was going to hire me for that position. Because when I went to go look, I met literally one qualification, and that was a 4-year college degree. I didn't meet any of the other pieces of what they were looking for in a sales rep. And every step of the way, to my surprise, they kept calling me back. So I ended up taking a position with a process consulting company that resold a number of different software platforms, and got the bug for what I'm now well known for in the world of digital transformation and change management, and what it looks like to successfully lead a tech implementation. So I spent about a decade in that enterprise sales position. And right smack dab in the middle of that tenure, I came across COVID. Like everybody else, all the tools that I had gone out the window. My approach had to completely change. And that's when I turned towards content and creating content as a way to educate people. And James and I, during that, especially that 2020, 2021 timeframe, spent a lot of time in our house talking through, how do you create content that builds a pipeline? How do you help educate people at a different level that builds trust? What are the small subconscious things that you're doing when you're creating content that allows people to want to work with you from an authority, and again, that trust component? And we started to, at home, while we were both in sales, develop what we now call the favorite teacher framework, which is kind of that like full circle moment back to his comment to me to go into sales in the first place. And so James actually took the leap to go into the consulting company first while I was still on the software side. And then I joined him about 3 years ago. And so now we focus on helping companies build out their digital strategy to build pipeline, drive authority, and really build that trust that we all know is what drives businesses.
Oh, there's so much to unpack in there. First of all, I would say, going back to the sales side, you're talking about, this idea of sales. And I think, in my opinion, some of the best salespeople I know don't sell anything. It's more of just having the conversations, connecting a passion for whatever that product might be, And I think you're right, leading with education and teaching, so to speak, along the way is, some of the best form, and some of the best people that I know in sales do that. They don't necessarily come at you with buy my product for this reason or that reason. That's just like you said, it's kind of sleazy. And it's that whole, like, I think another mindset that people have, and I think it gets picked on a lot, of the used car salesman approach, is a bad way, but also the way that we approach them with the walk away, like if this is a good car for you, this is a good fit, great, and walk away. And so I think with salespeople, like you said, leading with that education and teaching that, I think that's solid. I love that you led with that.
To your point, though, so many of the best salespeople don't identify as salespeople. And even depending on the industry that you're looking at, salespeople don't call themselves salespeople. And part of it is that like perception of, the game of like, do I call myself business development? Do we call ourselves, like partner, all of the different names. But then you go and you look at like accounting firms, their partners are their salespeople. Law firms, their partners are typically their salespeople. Maybe they've got a little bit of business development, but there are so many people that don't fit into the box of sales. And this framework works really well for those people that maybe need to get over the mental game of what they think it might be.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, I think everything, at least in my world, goes back to relationships. And I think that's the same thing in sales. And I do a lot of sales training myself. And I think one of the things that I end up going back to so much is too many salespeople think, and maybe they can have success there, but I've seen not. They think they can do a one call close or a one visit close. It's like, oh, I'm just gonna make this call, and then they get frustrated when it doesn't happen. And they may follow up once, maybe even twice if they're halfway decent, but they still get frustrated. It's like, I didn't close after the third call. It's like, sometimes it may take 8, 9, 10, visits with them or several years to build that. It's more a long game approach.
Oh, yeah. Well, and the stuff that I was selling, I mean, an 18-month sales cycle was on the shorter end. So those relationships and the messaging that you can get in front of people and the role that you play as that educator through that process is so important. And especially in tech sales, I would say like, used car salesman is like the one side of it, but like SaaS sales bro is like a very other like strong persona that you find in the tech space. And people want to work with people that are passionate about the problems they're solving. Maybe you don't know how to do the development, but you understand how the technology works. You're going to help like make them comfortable with the decision that they're making. And all of that adds up over time. And you can speed up an 18-month sales cycle to 12 months if you're doing a really good job with the content. So it's still much quicker in the grand scheme of things, but you've got to be prepared to build those relationships the right way and have a foundation of content that's authentic, that complements what you're doing in those face-to-face or, conversations that you're having over Zoom or calls.
Well, I think you're exactly right. In that same thing, I believe so many salespeople think that they can, I use salespeople loosely to your point earlier, but they think they can do it on their terms. And instead they forget thinking about who they're selling to, or selling to's terms, in their timeline. And they don't think about the other things going on in the life of who they're working with or selling to. And again, going back to that relationship and that building that trust. And I think, again, if you're going into it thinking, I've got this timeline, again, to your point, 18-month sales cycle, you can shorten that, but it also could be extended to 24 months. If you go into it, the mindset, I've got to get this closed in the next 2 weeks, or you go into it with this pressure, people can smell that.
Oh, yeah. Desperation reeks.
1,000%. I think it definitely does. It reeks. I like that. Desperation. I may have to title this episode "Desperation Reeks." But anyhow, no, I think you're right on that. And so I love that you've kind of leaned it. And again, to say I did it just to prove somebody wrong, but then you ended up doing it, and being a salesperson. But again, not being in that mindset of I'm a salesperson. It's more of, how can I meet their needs? How can I help them with their challenges? How can I help them solve their problems, whatever that might have been? And I think that's where that mindset, maybe it was because it was SaaS for you, or maybe it was because of what it was, but what was it that made you recognize that? Or was that just kind of a common sense thing for you, so to speak?
Well, I think again there were a lot of conversations internally, like in our house. At that point, I always joke that like when I was getting started, James had been in sales for a while, and so I was making this move, and um, truthfully, some of it was like beating my head up against the wall of what traditional sales tactics looked like. Like I am not unaware of what it takes to do cold calling. I went through that process. I tried it. I still like, I'm also a speaker. I can get up in front of thousands of people with less tremors in my hands and like anxiety than I can picking up a phone and doing interruption based like cold calling. And that's not to say that there isn't a time or a place for that kind of outreach, but when it's done the right way, doing these other kind of inbound approaches to business development gives you the opportunity that even if you're going to cold call someone, it's at least warm because they have seen a video of you, they know you're a real person. And so I tried all of those other things and I wasn't making progress. And I would come home and I'd be like, I don't think I'm good at this. Like, you told me I was going to be good at this, and this isn't what I thought it was going to be. And then we'd have conversations of like, well, what if you did a webinar? And, you know, or before COVID, those types of things were like, that was how you had the opportunity to educate. And then it was like, well, then what if I offer lunch and learns? And so everything was very educational based, where I played to my strengths and I played to what I knew was going to allow me to help my customers the most. And I never felt like I was helping someone when I was cold calling. I felt like I was interrupting someone. I had people who would, you know, I mean, everybody who's listening to this that's been in a producer role knows like you get hung up on, you have people swear at you, you just hit voicemail box after voicemail box. Like all of those things were things that I ran into repeatedly and was like, this isn't working. And so I started to develop a different way. I found that way. I was successful with that way. And then everything changed when COVID happened. And so it was like climbing that mountain again of the early days of COVID when we couldn't do anything but like go for walks. I was listening to sales books. I was listening to content creation books. I was binging podcasts that talked to me about the psychology of how to build relationships virtually. And I started to be like, well, there's something here. And when you look at Instagram, there's tons of people that are making a lot of money with these tools. Why aren't we doing it on the B2B side? Because when I go to buy a pair of pants, I'm not going to buy it online, even if it's, you know, $75 pair of jeans. I'm not going to buy it if I haven't seen a review from someone who's the same size as me, if I haven't seen a video of someone or pictures that look realistic. I'm going to read reviews, and all of that stuff plays into the way we buy on the like consumer side. So why aren't we applying those same tactics and those same tools in the B2B space? And it doesn't have to be boring. It doesn't have to be the thought processes that I had initially. And so that first couple of months was a lot of experimenting, a lot of trying to figure out what felt natural to me, what people responded well to, what kind of content they found value in. And through that ebb and flow, I found a groove, and I found a groove that allowed me to speed up existing sales cycles, to bring in new customers. I still like remember the first time I was on post COVID, like post content strategy. I had a very, very large deal that was in progress that had kind of stalled in the last, you know, mile. And we were trying to get the CTO to sign the contract. And I was, you know, trying to not be obnoxious, but figure out how to get it across the finish line. And I got a call from the CTO after I had left him a voicemail. And the first thing he said was, you popped up on my LinkedIn feed and it reminded me that I needed to call you back. And I came home that day and I was like, it worked. This is my first evidence that this like worked. And then, you know, that is a different indicator than just a lead coming in saying, hey, I saw a video. And then like those two things combined, I started to think through like, okay, well, if I know a company is having problems with decision fatigue and analysis paralysis, how can I create content that helps them think about this differently so that when we go and we have our next conversation, they're primed for that conversation, as opposed to just looking at it as like bringing brand new customers in. And then when you're in that and you're creating that content, it starts to create this flywheel where it helps you in person with your customers, but it also brings new people into the door, and you get better at what you do and you get better at your job because you're talking about it all day and you're working with this content on a daily basis to do that.
1,000%. And I love that. Again, you say so much that like I have to write these things down and go backwards and like rewind you a minute because, again, going back to all that you're saying. And again, I love that you lead with the education piece, and that's the conversation you have because, and you've been in the insurance space as well. And our customers, if you're talking about the consumer of insurance, have been trained a certain way by, ads or by commercials or, save money here, 15% or more in 15 minutes or less, or you've got, compare pricing, that all these things thrown at our consumers, our customers in the insurance space of, and I guess it's across all industries, but cheap, buy cheap, or whatever it might be, that you have to do that education to help them to realize they've been trained improperly or they've been shown the wrong thing. Because you can buy cheaper insurance, but that's what you're going to get is cheaper insurance. And maybe when you go to file a claim, you realize, oh, I didn't have coverage there. Or maybe when something happens, you're not going to have someone be there for you in the way you thought because you bought this thing. I could go down this rabbit hole for a long time, but to your point of having those, educational webinars or having those conversations or leading with the content you're leading with, again, it puts the right messaging in front of them, the right training, the right education instead of, and then they start questioning their own decisions like, did I buy the right product or did I handle that properly? Did I do this because like, oh, I saw this content Emma put out or Heath put out or John, Bill, Jane, whoever put out. When they start having those things, like to your point, when they have those conversations with you, it just sets up the conversations for a totally different mindset. And especially I like what you said about now fast forwarding when you were talking about the helping them thinking through change management or thinking through decision making. Maybe it has nothing to do with the product you're quote hawking or selling, but then they have the conversation when they get out, hey, I saw your content on this and I started thinking about this. And then you're having a conversation not about what you're selling, but you're solving a different challenge altogether. Then it's like, they might ask you, oh, so by the way, you sell this or do you do that, blah, blah, blah. Let's have that conversation. But it leads with, I saw this. It made me think about that.
And I think like for me, when I started creating content and I was in that enterprise account executive role, my performance was measured on how many software dollars and how many service dollars I sold. We didn't sell change management services, but
Right,
I knew
100%.
I knew my customers who were most successful with my software spoke highly of our team and bought more from us were the ones who had the right mindset of how to lead the change internally. And I also was like, well, this is not rocket science. Why are we getting it wrong? And so I started creating content there. Now I speak on change management and I do some advisory at the executive level with companies that are moving through this. But when I started creating that content, it was because it was the problem that I saw my customers not thinking through the right way, and it impacted our success when we were working with them. And so it changed the conversations and it elevated my position in the room with those conversations because I wasn't just trying to like schlep a product at them. I was trying to say, like, if you're going to put millions of dollars into this, let's talk about what's going to make you successful. And it showed my knowledge and my depth of experience in the industry, but it made them more successful. So they wanted to continue to work with us. And so I think sometimes we feel like when we're creating content, it needs to be focused on exactly what we're selling. It needs to have a call to action every time. It needs to, but that starts to feel like an infomercial and doesn't feel any differently than cold calling eventually. So it like you have to find the balance, and you should make it easy for people to work with you. You should make it clear what you do, but the goal is to get people to think about their problem differently and then have your solution on the other end to support them.
No, I agree. And, I think there was so much early on with social, with people, insurance agents trying, and again, I'm not saying that they were necessarily wrong, but if they're still doing it, they are, of like the content of like, Merry Christmas, give yourself the gift of a new insurance policy. And it's like, come on. Or like, I don't think, Happy Valentine's Day. We love insurance and we love you. Why don't you get this policy or whatever? Or even that, like, call me today for a free quote on your, it's just, again, I get what they were trying to do, and I understand early days that might have worked, but now like we've evolved, beyond that. I think the content should be more of, let's solve a challenge, let's solve a problem. And I go back to a man I've never met that changed my life, which John C. Maxwell, talks about the value add. Mm-hmm. And he talks about, if you bring people value first and you think about it from a standpoint of what value am I bringing to the table, everything else will fall into place. And so I don't remember which book. I've read like 30 of his books or however many he's got. I've read them all. I feel like, when I started changing my mindset in that of like, how can I serve? How can I love on people? How can I, bring value first? The rest it changed everything for me. And so, I like to agree with what you're saying, but also, to bring that, because I think, again, you're leading with that value part of it.
And I think that servant mindset of like servant leadership and how that transitions to content, when it's educational based content where you're really trying to help people think about something differently, the content's not about you. And I think that that's another piece too, is like social media makes a lot of people really uncomfortable. The idea of picking up a phone and making a video, putting yourself out there, that's like a vulnerable experience. But the nice thing about thinking through it from an educational content lens is it's not about you. When you're creating educational content, it's about the people that are on the other end and what you're helping them think through, what you're helping them learn. And when you do that, you are no longer the focus, they're the focus, and it becomes a lot easier to hit the record button or press post on something. And when you can take that mindset, it takes you out of it and allows you to create more like of that content that's genuinely valuable. And so I think that those two concepts certainly go hand in hand. And some of our customers that we've worked with that end up being the most successful with the content that they're creating will be the ones that tell you they're never comfortable on video. They're going to be the ones that tell you that they've never enjoyed, like not never enjoyed it, but like that it's not a natural inclination for them because they don't want to be an influencer. They want to drive revenue for their business and they want to help customers. And those are two different thought processes. And even like lifestyle influencers in comparison to like the kind of content that I'm creating, those are two very different things because my goal isn't to reach millions and millions of followers. That'd be great, maybe someday, but like that's not my ultimate goal. My ultimate goal is to get my ideas in front of more people so I can help them think through things in the way that I see drive success with technology implementations or implementing our framework.
Yeah. And it goes back to, and this might be a stretch of an analogy, but I get, and you probably do too, people that'll reach out like book publishers and whatnot and say, you should write a book, Heath. You've done all these podcasts, you've done all these speaking things or whatever. And I'm like, nobody would buy a book from me. And they always say the same thing. It's not about selling a book. It's about, promotion, getting yourself out there. It's about getting your ideas out there and just using that as a marketing tool, so to speak. If people buy the book, great. But if you can say you're an author, you've done this. And again, it might be, a terrible analogy, but I look at the same thing with social media. It's not about closing deals. It's not about selling this or that. It's just about getting your ideas out there. It's about serving those out there that are reading the posts. And I love that you said that. And I imagine that's what you get into when you talk to people about digital leadership and the concept of that, of if you take yourself out of it, people are way easier to talk about other people or talk about other things than what you get up there and say, talk about yourself for 5 minutes on a video or 30 seconds on a video. Like, but if you're getting out there, like talk about something you're passionate about, talking about something you're interested in, talking about other people, is that kind of, when you have those digital leadership and that concept on stage of talking about that kind of thing, is that kind of where you're leading from that? Is that some of those concepts?
That's definitely part of it. So our definition at Roloff Consulting of digital leadership is looking at how you're intentionally using technology as an avenue to grow your business, but it's not actually about the technology. It comes down to internal leadership and how clearly you're able to align your team around your purpose and what your actual goal as an organization is. And then digging a level deeper, how clear are you with the why behind the different decisions you're making in the business? And does everybody feel like they're on the same team, rowing in the same direction? So that's like the internal leadership component of it. To your point, there's a big piece of authority that comes into this because it's not just salespeople that should be creating content. And when you look at really big companies, their CEOs are splashed all over the place, and the things that they say move markets. The things that they say can tank their company if put in the wrong direction, or can make their company if they're making strong decisions that are rooted in that clarity. And then the last piece beyond content creation and that external authority is the mindset that you need as a leader to be comfortable driving that clarity and building that authority. And that all comes from a growth mindset that's rooted in the idea of intentionality tied with experimentation. So there's a balance, right? Like you cannot bury your head in the sand and avoid new things that are happening. You have to be experimenting with them. But you know from all of my content, I am not a fan of shiny object hunting. I'm not a fan of implementing just for the sake of implementing. And especially when it comes to technology, leaders constantly need to be learning, experimenting, but also coming back to that concept of clarity and purpose on a regular basis so that when they bring in a new technology or they try something new, there's a reason behind the experimentation and there's a goal that everybody has in mind that you can say, did this work or did this not work? Do we continue with this or do we put it to the wayside and experiment with something new?
No, so my question is, and I had to interrupt you. I'm sorry, because I keep having to remember what you said, and I want to make sure. So again, that balance, and I love that you talked about that, and now you hit a trigger with me apparently, because now I'm getting all like Energizer Bunny. But like, how do you work with people on this idea of staying true to who you are, being authentically you, staying true to that and your why and your purpose and all that, but also being open to change, open to technology, open to this? And it's that delicate balance of, because if you change too much all the time, then it's like, who are you? Like, you don't even know who you are and what you're doing anymore. But then if you stay too true to this, you're not open to this, then you're closing. There's a lot there. How do you balance that? How do you teach people in that? Because people listening right now are saying, AI is coming so fast at us. New technology is coming so fast to the insurance industry. And we're finally catching up to other industries in that. But yet I'm also told to be authentic and be true to myself and stay to my values and, not change too much. So how do you,
So I'm going to use an example because I think that that'll help think through kind of how some
Does
of
that make sense? Am I making sense, or
am
I getting yelled up and excited for nothing?
No, it does. So I'm going to use the example of like, I think the easiest one is going to be able to say like, okay, there's a independent insurance agency that has grown itself on the concept of how important relationships and community involvement is. And they do not want to step away from that. That is authentically something that they're incredibly passionate about. And it has served their business incredibly well to build those relationships and have that community involvement. I'm not saying replace any of that with social media, but could you create a series of videos that help you answer, or that help your customers answer the top 5 questions that they have when they come and sit down with you? You live in Wisconsin. A hailstorm just happened here, pretty bad, wrecked a bunch of cars at the airport. Maybe you create a video talking to people about what they need to do to file a claim, talking about next time this happens, what you need to think about to make sure you're covered. You could make a whole series on content that's localized to your community that's helping serve them through this event that's happening, staying true to who you are, but experimenting with new things that are maybe outside of your comfort zone. When we look at something like AI, again, going back to the same agency, they're hearing you need to bring in AI. You're going to be left behind. If you don't completely change the entire company, you're out of business tomorrow. But it feels drastically outside of what they've ever done. It feels like it goes against their authenticity. Don't bring in a chatbot that answers questions on your website then. Keep your people forward facing with those relationships. Keep your people focused on the piece that's always differentiated you, and look
And
at
use AI in the
opportunities.
back end.
Yeah. Look for opportunities to solve real problems. Go to your producers, go to your servicing team and say, what is something that you spend so much time on the back end that if we were able to automate would allow you to do a better job on that front end customer service? They're going to have ideas for you. And then you say, great, let me go do some research to figure out how we solve this problem using this tool. Maybe you go and you research and you figure out, oh, actually, there's something out there that we should have been using for 5 years that we haven't been, and it's not AI. Maybe we should implement that. Maybe we should move in that direction. But that process of being open to that conversation with your team with a clear purpose of, I want to provide a better customer experience with real humans because that's true to our ethos. How do we do that? And then going and doing the learning, and I call it digital literacy, like building that digital literacy of like, okay, so you told me that we need to fill this gap, but while I'm looking at it, AI is really not great at that right now, but it could help us in this area. Is that going to offload your work enough to drive towards our goal? No. Okay, let's look at other options. And it's intentional use of that technology as opposed to, everyone told me we need to use AI. I'm hearing voice agents are a really big deal. Let's bring them in and then you don't have to answer the phone. Well, no, that goes against who you're supposed to be as an organization, and probably why people joined your team, probably why a lot of your customers are working with you. But if you take the time to take a deep breath and build the knowledge and be intentional, then you get to stay lockstep with how things are changing, but also do it in a way that's authentic to you.
Yeah, again, I think also, I love that you say, because I say the same thing of bringing your team in, and talking to your team and bringing them into the conversation and making them feel like they're a part of it. Because again, and I want to get to change management, but there's a lot of that fear of your staff thinking, oh, they're just going to replace me, with AI. They're going to fire me because of AI. They're going to do this because of that. In my opinion, and we don't have to get into this, but it could be a squirrel moment, but I believe there's been an overcorrection. I think we're going to come back to center at some point in time where we're going to be like, okay, there's been so much AI, there's been so much automation, there's been so much here. We missed the human connection. We missed this. We missed that. I think we're going to see going back to that. I'm already I saw a trend here locally in Arkansas, and not because it's Arkansas before you make jokes about Arkansas. But there's kids in high schools and colleges that are going back to flip phones, and I'm seeing some of that, and it's like, really? And it's like, yeah, because there's so much coming at them in their face. There's so much. It's like my kid's going off to college, but I've heard conversations with him and his friends of like, we kind of want to take a break from that. We kind of want to get away from that. I think we're going to see that in our industry right now. It's like so much, but I think we're going to see it over correction. We don't have to go on that rabbit trail, but if you have any opinions on it, I'd love to hear them.
I think, well, the pendulum does swing. And, if you pay attention to Gartner's hype cycle, we've just kind of been living at the top of that hype cycle for a while with AI as a larger category. But AI is also an umbrella term. So there's a bunch of different technology that falls underneath it. So 2025's hype cycle was focused on generative AI. 2026 hype cycle is on agentic AI. And if we give them the leeway for it, 2027's hype cycle will be based on another type of AI. And we're going to all think of it in this same category until we start building that digital literacy to break it into different components, think of them as different tools, and think through where we have the opportunity to use the technology. So that's number one. Like, we are at the top of that right now and have been churning there for quite some time because of the way that this technology is evolving. On the other side, to your point with younger people, there's actually a pretty significant pushback from Gen Z and Gen Alpha on the use of technology. Anecdotally, I was in my daughter's classroom and we were doing a project. I did not bring it up. I started asking follow-up questions when the topic came up because I wanted to hear what they had to say. But these kids were talking trashing on their parents who use AI all the time, talking about how they don't like AI generated content, Even yesterday, our daughter came up to us to show, like my 7-year-old daughter came up to show us an ad that she had gotten in between playing rounds of her like chess game on her iPad. And she was like, this isn't a real person, right? This is AI. Cause it was like one of those ads that had been dubbed over. So they're growing up in this environment where they're constantly having to pressure test if things are real or not. And they're getting fatigued with that at a different level than we are.
And they're so big on, and I tease my kids a lot about it, because on the one hand, they're real big on authenticity and they want this authenticity, but yet there's so much fake out there. Again, totally another squirrel moment. But to stay on topic here, they want authentic, they want real. And so when they see that, and like, you've probably heard a lot of it, but on Spotify, I've started seeing these AI songs that'll come up, and some of them are cool. Like, I get it, but some are like, I got confused, a couple of them, and I've listened to a couple of them with my kids, and like, I can't do AI music, because you can feel when you have a real artist singing about their real challenges, their real problems, their real things, and I won't name any names, but when you hear an AI song, you can feel there's not an emotion there. It's just a catchy tune with some catchy lyrics, and it's whatever. But with a person's, like, you can feel that coming out in their voice. You can feel that, and I never thought about that. It's like, maybe AI music won't replace actual people. And like, my son, who's a senior in high school, he's been like 9 concerts this year, and like, there for a while, concerts went away, and he's like, no, Dad, I want to go. Even if I don't know, like, the being with people, singing along to music, and like elbow to elbow, shoulder to shoulder with people in the pit, like, it's so much fun, Dad. And I'm like, you should have been a kid in the 90s. We did that all the time. In the 2000s, we did it all the time. And he's like, I get it now.
Yeah. Well, and I think there's a certain amount of nostalgia that these kids see stuff. Like, I mean, on TikTok, I'll see videos that have gone viral of like crappy home videos from prom in 2007. And I'm like, oh,
Right.
we're like, that was, looking back at it, it's a little painful now for me to see like what we were doing. But like there is a call for a little bit more of that, a call for humanity to be in this. And I think that's why it's really important, and why we're so focused on this concept of digital leadership, is there's also a little bit of a disconnect, especially when it comes to AI. The conversations that you and I are hearing young people have, or the conversations that I see happening in my comment section on TikTok or Instagram tied to the way that employees feel about AI, are very, very different. And I'm starting, actually, even today, I was thinking about this, I'm starting to see a slight shift in the way that people even on LinkedIn are talking about AI, because I think we're kind of coming to that head where there is enough pushback and enough discourse about the other side of this, that leadership cannot only listen to what the big 4 consulting firms are saying on stage at a large conference. There is an incentive for them to get you to implement new technology and to do that. And again, this is not me saying don't do that. I used to be a software salesperson. I made a living that way. I don't think that there's anything wrong with being future for like facing and implementing technology, but the intentionality has to come back into it. And when I look at my career and I look at the different hype phases that we've lived through and the way that we've approached technology, I've seen enough of this, down into the despair and back up again, where I recognize the pattern. But right now, like I said, we're churning at the top of the hype cycle right now in a different way than I've seen with other technology. And I call it the FOMO cycle. And the FOMO cycle is on rinse and repeat right now in comparison to what we've seen in the past. Companies were cloud first 5 years ago. There was the huge SaaS movement where you couldn't possibly have any software on premise where you were managing the infrastructure. That's just silly. And there's been these big pushes over the years during COVID timeframe. Robotic process automation was going to solve everybody's problems. And I watched that same sentiment shift happen from the conversations of it's going to do everything we need it to it's a tool and here's where it really plays nicely. And I think we will get to that point eventually, but because we're at the top of that hype cycle and we've been there for such a long time right now, what happens is there's constant fear-based messaging. everybody's jobs are going to be eliminated. You will be left behind if you don't implement in 5.2 seconds. Your competitors are doing it. Why aren't you? These companies are going to gobble up everything that you've got. The SaaS apocalypse. Like, I could keep going with all of the things that are coming out right now. And what happens is that makes leaders, just like everybody else, get fearful. That message is meant to make them fear missing out, fear being left behind. And so instead of taking that path that we just talked about of intentionality, they knee jerk bring in solutions. They knee jerk implement stuff. They do things like what we're seeing right now. And this isn't probably at like the smaller company level necessarily, but big companies rolling out usage leaderboards of AI, incentivizing their teams just to churn on tokens and waste money. We see performance reviews shifting to questions about how often you're using this technology. And it's to try and drive adoption of a tool that came in with no purpose. And you can break that entire cycle by starting with the purpose. And that's what digital leadership is that intentionality of having clarity and confidence in what the focus of your company is, really understanding that and making sure that your team understands it, and then evaluating where you experiment with that technology in ways that drive value or create new value or solve problems. And that breaks that whole cycle, and it allows you to realize that that hype drops, and it allows you to realize, if I can be not even slow and steady, if I can be steady in the way that we're experimenting, you are going to win the race in comparison to people that are slapping tools on, losing employees, wasting money. That steady intentionality will win out. You don't have to be afraid of missing out. You have to have a clear purpose that you're confident in that allows you to shrug off the FOMO.
Yeah. Geez. I love these kind of conversations. I don't think I've even asked you a single question. I think we just have to, and you just given me so much in the audience so much. So I can appreciate that so much. And I know the audience does too. And so, it's funny. I talked to so many agencies and even vendors and whatnot in different roles in my life. And some of the conversations I have, one week I'll have a conversation like, oh, we've gone all in on I don't know, just making up some Claude, and we're doing this with Claude, and da-da-da. And the very next week we'll have a conversation, and I'll just be like, so how's it going with that Claude thing you're working? Oh, we ditched Claude. We're not doing that anymore. Now we've moved on to this.
Now we're on ChatGPT because the next model came out and it's the frontier one and it's so much better. Have you seen what images it generates?
Right. Or it's like they'll buy a piece of technology or they'll, implement. And I'm like, how's that going? Are you enjoying that? What is it like? Oh, we quit using that a long time. Now we replaced it with this. And week to week might be a little extreme, but sometimes it can be that extreme of like day to day, week to week. It's like, no. And on the one hand, to your point, there's some of that can be a good thing to be like, hey, we tried it out. We moved on quickly instead of just sitting on the shelf, not using it. But another reason, it's like that steady approach, like you said, you don't have to buy everything that comes out. And, there's also that wait and see thing. And again, could be a very, clunky analogy, but my wife is, and my kids are, one of my kids anyway, are big into like fashion and trends and like whatnot, and pay attention to that. And I say my wife, she's not into trends, but we talk about it, and she's like, the people that are into the trends and they follow the trends, they're constantly changing out their closet, and they're constantly out of style if they stick with that trend way too long. But those that like find the classic style that works for them, or like she tells our daughters all the time, they're teenagers, they're going through changes and whatnot. It's like, find what you're comfortable in, find what works for you, your style, and then stick to that. And if you want to throw in some trendy pieces here and there, great, but stick with what works for you and your body. And I know, again, we're talking about tech here, but I think the same thing can apply.
And fashion use the same, kind of fast fashion. And I think
thank you very much, because I thought it was going to be a terrible transition, but I do see that every time my wife talks to my kids about it. Again, my work brain goes into full effect. I'm like, that's a great analogy for tech, because if you stay with the trends, again, if you can afford to do it, great. You're going to be changing all the time.
And I think even like this FOMO piece, I always talk about and I pick on myself. Back in college, I was the queen of FOMO. I wanted to be there for everything. I wanted to be the life
Back
of
in
the
my
party.
day,
Yeah, I didn't want to miss out. And it didn't matter if I had worked, like my senior year of college. I was student teaching, I was working full time, and I had classes, and I wanted to be a senior in college. It didn't matter if I had worked 70 hours that week and was exhausted and actually deep inside of me didn't want to go out. There was like a little bit of an insecurity about being left out. So I would do things or try to push James out to go do stuff he didn't want to do. And he would always like make fun of me for my FOMO back in the day, being like, it's okay for you not to be involved in everything all the time. Now, as an adult who's comfortable and confident in like who I am and what I am trying to achieve in my life, if I've been on the road and I've been traveling and we're invited to do something and I'm beat tired, I have no problem being like, oh, sounds like a lot of fun. I'm going to sit in front of the fireplace and read a book and go to bed at 9 o'clock at night. And it comes from a point of security in who I am and what I'm trying to accomplish. And from the business perspective, if you have a clear purpose and you are confident in that purpose and what problem you're trying to help your customer solve, FOMO can go away because you are better at evaluating what helps you drive towards that purpose and what doesn't. And it's the same mentality behind it. It's the same thing. Like I used to waste a lot of money on clothes back in the day to be fashionable, to be on top of it. And now I look at some of that stuff and I look at my girls, I'm like, oh yeah, don't wear that kind of stuff, like, and it's the same mindset and it's the same psychology behind it. And the part that's frustrating is the fashion industry knows the psychology that goes behind it. The tech industry certainly does. And anybody who's been in sales knows that loss aversion or fear are some of the biggest triggers to get people to buy. And so it is intentional when Salesforce's CEO goes on to goes on to CBS. I don't know if that's where he actually made this comment, or goes on to a podcast and says he cut 4,000 heads because they needed less people because their AI solution's so good. Well, guess what? He's also trying to sell you that AI solution, and he's trying to tell you that you're being left behind if you don't do what he does. He knows exactly what he's doing, and then it ended up backfiring, and they had terrible PR from it. Their solution didn't deliver the results that they were looking for, and now they're rehiring people back. So, like you can listen to that and you can get like, oh my gosh, we're going to miss out. Or you can listen to that and be like, let's dig into it a little bit more, learn about it, and see if there's a spot where it makes sense. That's an okay reaction. You don't have to jump at everything.
No, 100%. I love it. And there's so many things here that I wanted to get into, and I'm running out of time, and so I don't want to take too much of your time. But I say that and then say, but. Don't you love that? I really want to value your
one
time.
More.
Now I sound like a salesperson. Dang it. No. Okay. So I do have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, I think I've been through this. Okay. Gosh, I'm such a squirrel. Have you ever listened to Smartless You ever heard of Smartless podcast? It's Jason Bateman, Will Arnett, and Sean Hayes. Have you ever heard of it?
I think I've seen clips of it. I haven't listened to the whole podcast before.
I listen to it religiously. I think they're hilarious. I call them my best friends, but they'll go through a whole podcast and they'll laugh at the end like, I didn't ask a single question. But again, I think that's some of the best conversations. But I did want to ask you, okay, so going back to change management and what we've been talking about through some of those things, are you, okay, this is not my question, but are you a Marvel person at all? Did you watch any of the Avenger movies and Marvel movies at all, like the superhero movies?
I'm definitely not a Marvel person, but I am aware.
Well, in the Avengers movies, there was this blip that they had where like the time, there's a time before the blip and after the blip. And I do that same very thing with, and my Marvel fans that are listening, you get me, thank you. But I do everything now from before COVID and after COVID. And you brought up COVID as a very pivotal moment in your career. Same with mine. Same with many, many people listening to this podcast right now. And so some of the question and some of the concepts and some of the things you're going through now, obviously you mentioned earlier, you and your husband sat down and talked through some of those things on your walks and whatnot. But can you attribute a lot of the concepts you're using now, a lot of the things you're in now, a lot of success you're having now to that very, I say dark time in a lot of our life, which it was, but also such a light looking back, 5 years later, 6 years later now, to say, look at the concepts that came out of that. Would you say same thing with you? Like a lot of the success you're having now, the concepts you developed during that time?
Oh, yeah, 100%. And I think a lot of people are kind of surprised when I say this, but like pre April of 2020, I didn't really have much of a social media presence at all. I had a Instagram. I had gotten rid of my Facebook. I had a LinkedIn, but there was really nothing to write home about on it. And I had never thought about how content creation could help me in sales. It was that like it was COVID 100%. And like I can tell you the exact conversation. James and I were sitting in the wild, is what we used to call it, because obviously our kids were really little at that point. And they were watching Frozen 2 on repeat because it had just come out. And we were about 2 weeks, 3 weeks in, and we had kind of gotten to the, there was like the 17 days to slow the spread. We had just gotten past that, and we were like, this isn't ending anytime soon. And I had a $3 million quota that still had to be met. And I had been cold calling from the one office space we had when we would trade off who was with the girls out in the wild. And I was getting no one. Everybody had forwarded no one had forwarded their phones. I was doing webinars that no one was attending because everybody pivoted to webinars all of a sudden. I was not able to actually connect with anyone. And I was like, what do I do? And James looked at me and he was like, why don't you try making video content? Like, you're good at speaking. And I was like, does anybody want to watch that? Like, is that a thing? And his response to me was like, worst case scenario, no one watches it and you stop. Kind of going back to that idea of like, what do you have to do to experiment? You try it. And I tried the first video. I joke I used our baby as a prop. She's 7 now, but she was 1. And I was not comfortable being on video by myself. The idea of hitting record and talking at the camera was so intimidating. I was like, come on over here, baby. You're going to bobblehead next to me while I do this, so I'm not alone. And I made the first video. It was the highest like impression rate I had ever had on LinkedIn at that point. And I was like, okay, well, now I see that it at least got me exposure in a way that I'm not getting anywhere else. So now I have to play out this experiment, and now I have to see where it goes.
You got that dopamine hit.
Yeah. And I started an interview series, and then the interview series started to grow. And it took me a long time before I was comfortable without anybody else side by side with me, like we are right now on the podcast, to then pick up my phone. It wasn't until 2021 that I started my TikTok. And it took me a long time to get there. And I think a lot of people now would look at like the content that I create and they're like, oh, this girl has no shame. She'll do whatever, And I've reached that point because I'm like, I need to keep experimenting with things. I have to push myself outside of my comfort zone still. Just because I got good at it at one point doesn't mean I can stop. But I still try to be true to who I am, try to show my personality and all of that in the content. But had COVID not pushed me, I would have kept going with a lot of what I had been doing because at that point it was working well. And I was our top contributor in the company. And so there would have been no incentive for me to drastically change what I was doing. And COVID also opened up the capacity to have an audience. I don't think people were watching content that way on LinkedIn before everybody was trapped inside their house. And, it's the same thing with like the rise of TikTok and everything else. Like those tools didn't really exist pre-COVID because there wasn't a need from a society standpoint for that yet. And so I think it really did change a lot, and it changed the trajectory of my career for sure.
Yeah, I love hearing people's COVID stories because, again, I want to remind people that are listening that, yes, COVID was a dark time in most of our lives, and I get that. But there's so many success stories that have come out of that. And so many people that I talked to 6 years later, they look back on it and smile, or they look back on it, they have fond memories, and they're like, whether it's I spent more time with my kids, I got to do this, or it was like I got to get closer with my husband, or I got to grow my business, or I learned about social, or there's those stories. So anyhow, thanks for playing that with me. Yeah. Now tell me, because we haven't even gotten there yet and I wanted to, but tell the audience, tell people listening, tell me a little bit about Roloff Consulting, how people could find you, because I know people are listening. It's like, dude, I want to connect with this woman. I want to talk to this woman. I want to talk to James. I want to get involved with Roloff Consulting. Tell me a little bit about Roloff Consulting. You got me on Frozen 2. I was thinking about Olaf. Tell me. I'll shut up.
One, I just have to say, the Olaf thing happens quite frequently. And like, we've been at hotels before where they're like, oh, Mr. and Mrs. Olaf. And we're like, nope, not snowmen. But to get back to the initial question of who we are. So we have, I've talked a lot about the favorite teacher framework. Most of our work is rooted in helping companies implement that. And so we have a 6-month implementation of our framework that we work with companies on. And of course, we can work with you beyond that, but it's starting with what we call the report card, where we're looking at where your digital presence is, the work that you've already done, and helping you prioritize what activity is going to help you accomplish your goals, because there's always more to do on social media. There's always things that you can be, again, going back to the FOMO, that people will tell you need to be doing everything. What we've found is that we can look at what you're doing, hear about your goals, give you that report card, and then prioritize and help you implement from there. So a lot of what we're doing there is working with insurtech companies, agents and brokers, and then also services companies of all different sorts within the insurance industry and beyond. So really anybody that has expertise that is key to the success of their working with their clients, you need to be showcasing that online. And that's where the favorite teacher framework comes in. We also have what we call the Catalyst community, which is a community for executives and business owners that want to implement the framework, want to get more active on social media, but maybe don't have the capacity to bring us in on the full-time advisory side of things, or on the advisory side of things. And so that is a group coaching online program that we run. And there's a couple of different options there, including masterminds, where you're sitting down with us on a weekly basis and talking with us about your strategy and what you need to be doing to kind of like, again, get those goals, because they're going to be different for everyone's companies. And then the last piece is I do a lot of yapping, clearly. We've got a couple of different YouTube channels with content. We're constantly posting across different social media platforms. And then I also do keynote speaking and workshops, both to implement the favorite teacher framework, but then also talk about digital leadership, change management, and all of those other things that fall under that umbrella.
And if they want to find you on LinkedIn, or Instagram, or whichever social platform of your choice, where would they find you? Is it just your name?
Yep. If you look up Ema, Ema Roloff, not Olaf.
Not Olaf. Did we say at the same time?
Yes, we did. Jinx. But yeah, if you look up Ema Roloff across any of those platforms, I'll pop up. On Instagram and TikTok, I'm also go by the alias of Transformation Princess, which is a story for another day. If you search my name, I will show up as well.
That's awesome. And is there a website to go to for
Roloff? Roloffconsulting.com. We made it nice and easy. The two Roloffs started Roloff Consulting, so you can find us there as well.
Thank you again for hanging out with me today. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having
the
me.
Audience, and thank you for not letting me ask any questions, but just reading my mind and getting into reading the audience's mind of what they wanted to hear. So thank you. You gave so much content. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, and have a wonderful day, everybody. Thanks for listening.